I would be interested in your vision of what does an ideal healthcare system look like when you are moving it from a place of mindfulness and stress reduction and attention, awareness, focus.
Well, I don't think anybody really knows, but at least we can sort of paint a little bit of an impression of what it might be. And by investigating it and enacting it, then we continually learn. So the whole idea of mindfulness-based stress reduction back in 1979 was to use the environment of a hospital to catch people falling through the cracks of what we would call the healthcare system. And many, many people, it turns out, fall through the cracks of the healthcare system. And to challenge them to do something for themselves in a kind of form of participatory medicine that would tap into their deep interior resources, which everybody has by virtue of being born and being human, for learning, for growing out of the learning, for healing, and for transformation. Not as a kind of the opposite of healthcare, but as a complement to whatever medical treatments and so forth people can have. But the basic idea was to have hospitals actually teach people how to stay out of the hospital and to use the hospital much more wisely and to use the medical system much more wisely. In fact, what we have so far is much more a disease care system than a healthcare system. You're not knocking that we have a good disease care system, although it's very, very expensive. But what if we could rotate that in consciousness so that we're teaching people, so to speak, how to be healthy across the lifespan through diet, through exercise, through yoga, through meditation, through a sense of deep interconnectedness with others and purpose, and then let that kind of be the sort of default mode, so to speak, of how we live our lives. And then, of course, untoward things always happen, and sooner or later we're going to die. But the question, I mean, people often ask me, well, Oprah once asked me this thing, well, John, just out of the blue, what do you think about life after death? And I'm saying, Oprah, I'm not that interested in that question. I'm much more interested in, is there life before death? And so you see where that's going. It's like, how can we actually live the moments that are ours to live? That's what yoga is all about. And then let the awareness be a kind of full spectrum awareness that doesn't stop at the skin, but that goes deep down into the bones, into the genome, into the telomeres, into the connectivity and plasticity of the brain, and also out into the social networks, and into government and into society and globally. So that would be a kind of redefinition of what we truly mean by health. And I think that your work at AETNA is just a kind of object lesson for all of us to kind of wake up and realize that whether it's how much we're paying our workers or how the systems that we develop, that as long as we come in with an old mindset that's really more like auto mechanics than anything else. You drive your car until it breaks down, then you go in and get a new liver or a new carburetor or whatever. And that's not to say that at times people don't need that kind of high-tech medicine, but why not develop a truly participatory, mindful, heartful medicine where people live their lives in community and let the community actually nurture that? And you told me backstage this phenomenal idea about the phrase you used was Uber nurses. So I'd like to just really hear what your vision is for how to, Mark, for how to actually bring that into the society in a way that would globalize, generalize, way beyond hospitals.
Well, I think, John, and you've laid all this incredible foundation and framework for all of us to work with, so thank you very much for the incredible work you've done. You make my job a lot easier, making and setting this up. But think of this as an idea. In the 1850s, you have to have a broader heuristic about how to fix problems than looking at the issues you're facing today, because you're bound to repeat your problems if you don't. So if we go all the way back to the mid-1800s, we had an agrarian society where people worked together, they grew things together, they made things together, and nobody fell through the cracks. They lived in community. And we had the Industrial Revolution, the Information Revolution, the Knowledge Revolution, and we lost all of that. And so now we find community on these devices we carry around in our pockets, And to some degree, it's interesting because we have bigger communities than we had before, but yet that isn't what people want. So what if we turn the healthcare system around, as you suggest, John, and we say, a healthy individual is productive, viable, socially, spiritually, and economically, and happy. And we want to do that person by person, community by community, then that has to start at home. It can't start anywhere else. It can't start in a hospital or a doctor's office. It has to start at home. And what if we redefine work as instead of working for the man, which is what I always swore I would never do, now I am the man. What if instead of working for the man, you work for yourself? And you work in community and taking care of people in the community. And the best place to do that is healthcare. Why should people have to leave their houses to go to a doctor's office or to see someone for care? Why can't we bring stuff, people, and technology to the home? And why can't we keep people there? And why do the people that do that have to work for somebody? Why can't they work in community? So there's a technology called TaskRabbit where you have the ability to sign up for philanthropic work. I've done it a couple of times. And you go and you ride around, I ride around and deliver Meals on Wheels on my bicycle in Manhattan. And what if you could do that with healthcare? And you could say, I'm gonna sign up from 7 to 11 today and from 6 to 10 tonight, and I'm available for these services. Who in my community needs me? And we'll pay you differently. And you can walk to work, and we can reduce the carbon footprint. And you can be in community, and you can be home with your families, and you can do all of that work. That's what the healthcare system should be like. And you only go to the doctor or the hospital when all of that doesn't work.
You and me sitting on the stage, and virtually everybody in the audience understands that one of the, if not the key element to any kind of profound transformation is to have a practice of some kind. This has been brought out by many people on the stage and in our conversations together over the past few years. So I would love to hear you speak about how you bring your own life and practice and life experience into the unfolding of your largest view about how to transform healthcare into this society so that, one, it's caring, and two, it works in a profound way.
Well, I don't think anybody can lead effectively unless they have a personal practice that presents their best self to the world every day. And because the journey is inward, because the requirement is that we need to have a trust model in order to make these changes, to take the steps that we need to take, like we did with minimum wage and with yoga. You have to convey a sense that you believe, not what's right. I mean, the worst thing we've ever created in the United States, and we've destroyed economy after economy, is the spreadsheet. Because we put numbers on it, and it's called truth.
Yeah.
And then we manage the variance to truth. And it's all BS, quite frankly. It's about what are the assumptions behind it, and what do we need to believe. And in order to believe, you have to trust. And the only way you get trust is that you give it. And to give trust, you have to have a personal practice, and you have to take the inner journey to make that first step. Because unless you know who you are and what you stand for, you can't begin to trust others with your ideas and your beliefs in order to make change.
And no matter how healthy you would be in terms of your biology, if you're not connected to the deep elements of who you are and how you are in relationship, then really you couldn't be said to be healthy at all.
Right.
Better than me, but you can't be great unless you're vulnerable. You really can't lead unless you're vulnerable too. And I think that's part of the rub now with the presidential. I hate to keep bringing it up, but it is on TV all the time, infiltrating us as we speak. But there's very little vulnerability. There's very little, I'm going to say this, and I know that, at the end of the day, it may hurt me, but I need to say it because I think it's the best direction for us to go.
If I may, I'd like to point out and really also ask you about how this figures in your work, that now there is an ever-growing science of mindfulness and science of yoga that really brings a deeper understanding of what it means to be human in the sense of the plasticity of our biological systems. So not just neuroplasticity, that meditation and exercise and all sorts of different things, including how you eat and how you are in relationship, actually transforms not just activity in the brain, but the real estate of the brain in ways that develop profound connectivity between regions that before may not have had it. There's just something that came out in the New York Times this very week by David Creswell at Carnegie Mellon, a beautiful study of mindfulness versus relaxation that shows brain changes when you pay attention to the body, no brain changes when you don't, and also inflammatory markers that go down in the mindfulness case and not. So we're learning that in terms of longevity, in terms of gene expression of inflammatory genes and so forth, that these kinds of practices actually, they're not just like sort of like, Om Kumbaya, we're all one, but they actually, not that I'm knocking that, but that there's actually transformation going on, that the more you get out of your own way, the more it happens. And the more you try to get the transformation, or I have to lower my blood pressure, or I have to calm my mind, or all of that stuff, you're going to learn that it's a practice of non-doing rather than adding one more thing in or forcing anything to happen. Whether you work for AETNA or you work someplace else or other, or you're in the home, whatever it is that you're doing, that's the most important thing on the planet at this particular moment for you to be doing. And if you're doing it consciously, then in some sense, maybe we will get healthier, but in another way, we're never going to be any healthier than we are right in this moment.
So, Mark, one of the things that drives the healthcare system is incentives, reimbursements, not to get too technical. But can you talk a little bit about how we would, whether it's from Washington or within insurance companies, how do we shift the incentives, the reimbursements, so that people who teach MBSR, for example, can get reimbursed to do that? People who teach dietitians and nutritionists, how do we create that system?
So we need to create an evidence base that's large enough to rely on. Now, there are ways to pay for it today. So if you have an FSA or an HSA or an HRA, you can pay for those services through those funds. So that makes it available to you. We do offer a number of alternative or complementary therapies that are covered depending on the employers that want to cover them. So yoga, acupuncture, energy medicine. But it really depends on the belief of those providing the coverage as to whether or not they believe it can help. And so we need to build out that evidence base, and that's why we'll make a $1 million investment through our foundation this year alone in building out more of that evidence base. We're doing with Goldie Hawn Foundation mindfulness in the schools, in inner city, middle schools where there's a lot of violence and fear, and we're having incredible results. We should pay for that.
I'm amazed at how progressive you are, how your company is, and I just think if we had 20 other CEOs like Mark, where this country would be right now. And I wonder, people ask me all the time, meditation, yoga, and the stuff that I do, what do your colleagues think about it? So I'd like to ask you, the CEOs that you interact with, what's their opinion of this?
Well, when the CEO does it, everybody has to do it, right?
Yeah. Other CEOs, though,
you're the man.
You are the man, yeah.
But when others, it was funny when I started talking about it, my team's going, "Oh, Bud, you better be quiet. People are going to think you're a nut. They're going to think you're woo-woo. You're not running a commercial enterprise. Are you a not-for-profit all of a sudden? You're going to be a bad guy." That was back when our stock was at $32 a share. It's at $107 today. But what I found was a bunch of other CEOs that were doing it that didn't talk about it because they were afraid of it. And now they are. And you hear now it's cool to be mindful as a CEO. But I think in the authentic version of it, I think people who are present, aware, vulnerable, being who they are, you can see it in the way their followership flows. So leadership comes from followership, not from being anointed. And so in order to build that followership, you have to be authentic, you have to be vulnerable, you have to be real. And that's been part of my mission. And 1979, I was putting together rear axles at Ford Motor Company after flunking out of college for the second time. And here I am running a Fortune 20 company.
Okay.
Ford Motor Company, great company, by the way. But here I am. So I have this huge opportunity to take this gift that I've been given and turn it into something bigger. And so we have a microsite for CEOs to look at. We encourage them to engage in the dialogue to be better. I think if we have a capitalist system that's broken by any measure of any person in the system today, including CEOs who would say it's broken. Our incentives are all wrong. And I gave my team a copy of Thomas Piketty's book on capitalism in the 21st century because I said, you know what? It's ignorant. It displays ignorance to challenge other people's ideas unless you understand them. Yet we have people that challenge other people's ideas all the time out of ignorance, and they get applause lines for it, and it's wrong. And so what we need to do is we need to educate everybody, and if we as captains of capitalism don't change the system, it will fall apart, and we should find our way. And part of that is through mindfulness and authenticity and vulnerability in leading our way forward. If we don't reinvent it, who will? And at a time it worked. It doesn't work today.